BMW is purely known for the fun of driving. How the car drives, how it handles itself, how it can speed up, how it can take a turn, which other cars can't.
People have these 3-4 brands in their mind, but they're not really loyal to one, especially it's a first-time luxury buyer. What strategy specifically has helped you to get into that target segment?
The main hurdle in people's mind, stepping up to luxury, they feel that the space is not good enough for their family. It has to be fully loaded.
पैसे दिए तो सब चाहिए. Customizing to the local needs. Global brands across industries have had to do it. So in case of BMW, how BMW has catered or tweaked its offerings for the Indian consumer?
Let's start with, if you ask somebody, when you think about BMW, what's the word that comes in your mind?
Sheer driving pleasure.
At least for the BMW customers, I can definitely tell you that they're very loyal to the brand.
Thank you for knowing that. Are you one? Auto industry is about real cold face facing a customer. To sell one car, you need to contact 100 customers.
Great. So we have Mr. Vikram Pawah. He needs no introduction. He's been the president and CEO of BMW India. Now, congratulations. I've heard that you're headed to Australia now to head BMW there. Mr. Pawah has had two decades of leadership experience across automobile sector, be it Honda, Hero, and obviously now BMW. So huge round of applause for him. We have some fantastic insights coming in today. We've had BMW have a lot of success during your leadership, right? So I would want to understand when you took the reins, what were the challenges and how you navigated one or two things that really changed the trajectory of BMW here.
I won't say that BMW had success only during my tenure. I think that will be taking too much of credit of it. But I think if you look at it, BMW has had a very good history in India. So we've been in India for almost 18 years now, right? And when we arrived in India, the luxury segment was a very small market. It was only 2,000 units roughly a year. And our competition had been there maybe 10, 15 years before us. So they could do nothing, honestly. So when we arrived, within 5 years, we got the market, the luxury market, to be almost equal to 35, 40,000 units. So you can imagine the kind of multiplication factor we were able to influence. So I think that's the DNA of BMW. Anywhere it goes, it does that. So I think when I arrived here for my second stint, probably, during COVID, so it was quite a tough time, of course, right? For the nation, for the country, for people, for our teams. And we also had some kind of internal crisis as well at that moment. There were a few key people in our organization that passed away. So it was quite a tough environment at that time. And that's the reason I came back. I was in Australia at that time already, but I had to come back because I already knew the market. So I did that. But I think the main thing what we focused on initially was obviously getting out of COVID, right? So you have to make sure that everybody is safe and you're always operationally capable, right? So although you're in a shutdown environment, lockdown environment, but you can always make sure that when it opens up, you bounce back strong. And I think that was one of the key things, that as soon as it opened up, we were really ready and we started implementing our strategies immediately, right? So that helped us because we had a fast start compared to competition. And then after that, of course, it was the team that came up together and said, okay, we've gone down. We were at a high before. We've really gone down. We can recover from that. We came up with a strategy about how do we come back. So we worked with a lot of teams in the company, right? So we said, okay, we're going to have power to lead. We're going to change the game later on. So we keep on working on these kind of war cries, if you call it.
Yeah.
And I think that helps because that bonds everybody together on the team, exactly what you're trying to do. And then you try to link everything you're trying to do to that war cry. So these are a couple of things, right? Involving people, making sure they're operationally capable during crisis, communicating with them, coming up with a strategy together, and then bouncing back really super strong after that.
Fair. If I were to talk about the macroeconomics in India, which is that the Indian consumer is going towards the luxury segment. And the Indian consumer is now ready to spend more on things like car and has an aspiration to own one of the luxury brands, right? And in my personal experiences also, I've seen that people have these 3-4 brands in their mind, but they're not really loyal to one. They're just thinking which one should I go for, especially it's a first-time luxury buyer. So what strategy specifically has helped you to get into that target segment who is now, earning and ready to spend and buy their first luxury car?
You're right. Indian consumer, A, it's unique, and B, it's fairly at a nascent stage, especially for luxury buying, right? Because I think it's only a phenomenon of last 10 years, technically, and more of last 5 years since COVID, right? So you're right. I think after COVID was YOLO effect that, okay, you live only once, fine. But now it's more about I want to have an experience. And this is where they're learning, I would say. They're in that learning curve, and that's why you pointed out correctly that they don't so much distinguish between the brands so much as yet, But once they get into the fold of luxury, then they start understanding why these 3 or 4 brands are actually different. So for example, BMW is purely known for the fun of driving. Sheer driving pleasure is our DNA. That's what we believe in. It doesn't mean that you can't sit at the rear, but the point is the feeling about that. How the car drives, how it handles itself, how it can speed up, how it can take a turn at high speeds, which other cars can't. Right? So that's something we're trying to now address with the Indian consumer. Right? So that's the kind of nuance here to work with, really, with this consumer that, that, okay, you're a driver at heart, but you can't actually drive at 180 kilometers an hour, which our cars can do very beautifully. Yeah. So it's, I think, more about, like I said, going back to this thing about the experience, what I'm trying to do. Even though physically you can't experience it. But when you take that whole shot performance out of the set of traffic lights, right? If you are there at the front, even if for that split second, I think that thrill is good enough. So I think we find the way to connect with Indian consumers, and we've done a lot of work in researching about the customer, what they're looking for. So we know we are family oriented, right? We all know that. India as a culture is family oriented. We don't buy a car for ourselves, we buy it for the family. Right? No matter if we want to say that I bought it for myself, but we know that we bought it for the family or friends, really. So I think addressing that need was one of the key part of our take on India to grow the market, right? That how do we get more people to choose luxury as their first car, right? Because if you look at the history of India, we started with small hatchbacks, slowly graduated to what we call as maybe bigger hatchbacks or sub 4-meter cars, then got into what you call as maybe mid-sized sedans, then SUVs, then smaller SUVs. And now the trend is about that, okay, I've done all that, I want to really enjoy luxury. Yeah. But we need to give them a reason that it's actually true for them, it is right for them, and it's right for their family. So addressing the family need along with that DNA of thrill is the combination that you need to work.
And that's the brand positioning, right?
That's the brand positioning at the moment. So if you look at when we launched in January, the X1 long wheelbase, right? I mean, that was a model that we actually specifically built for India. Right, from in a right-hand drive version. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So we had to do it because we understood that the main hurdle in people's mind on stepping up to luxury, because this is the first luxury car that they're buying, is they feel that the space is not good enough for their family. So we went in for an extended wheelbase version so that they could get the kind of road presence and the comfort and the space that they need for their family.
And I think you brought a good point of customizing to the local needs. Global brands across industries have had to do it, whether it was McDonald's launching Aloo Tikki Burger, right, when coming to India.
Or KFC having a vegetarian menu, right?
Yeah, so the global brands have always had to do these things. So in case of BMW, you mentioned one example, but we wanted to know more about how BMW has catered or tweaked its offerings for the Indian consumer. What are these particular consumer behaviors in India that don't exist globally, and hence, special products were offered or anything was changed in marketing, especially for the Indian market?
Let's start with, first of all, the product first. Okay, let's talk about that. So I gave you the example of X1 long wheelbase, but even before we launched the X1 long wheelbase, one of the things we got to understand from an Indian consumer point of view was that when they're buying luxury, they want it all. In India, luxury buying is very unique because in the world, luxury car, when you're buying, the way you buy it is you have a base car and then you build up your options based on your requirement, right? That if you want seat heating, you want to put it there. If you want cruise control, you'll add on that, right? You'll add on sunroof if you need that. And your car will be built based on what you need. In India, we realized that when we started offering the base car, people felt, no, that's not luxury, right? It has to be loaded. It cannot be something that you can say that, okay, of course, individualization, so don't get me wrong. Individualization is there, but that's after you packaged it up, right? If you stop dropping features and things like that, I think consumers felt shortchanged. So that's why what we had to do was we had to launch products with almost all the options that were feasible for India.
All the functionalities that you could.
Absolutely. So imagine, I'm not sure how many people in South will ever use seat heating. I'm not sure. Or
But
how
it's
many
there.
people actually use cruise control. I'm not sure. Right? Or how many people will actually use a sunroof and open it up in Indian environment, in Delhi especially. But they want it. If you drop that out, you have an impact.
पैसे दिए तो सब चाहिए.
Even आप पैसे ना भी मांगिए, मतलब आप उसके पैसे कम भी कर दीजिए, sunroof हटा के, they want everything. So I think that behavior we have to understand that, and that's why you'll see our cars are fully loaded now. Absolutely.
Fair,
and that's
fair.
and we keep on increasing the load level every time
Yeah.
we go with the next model. Yeah.
So now, when you're operating in India as a global brand, there are government policies, regulations, and I'll come to the EV side of things separately. But right now, just talking about Make in India or local sourcing or the different tax implications of whether you are locally sourced versus not, etc. How has these regulations impacted your strategy on either of the fronts?
The entry barriers that are there in India in terms of your custom duty, so when you have to enter India, you have to enter in a manufacturing base. You can't enter India without. That's how it is. It's not like you're going.
That's the requirement.
That's the base requirement, and many countries have that. India is not the only one. China was exactly like that many years ago, right? So is a lot of ASEAN countries, very similar kind of a behavior. So it depends on where the economy is in that growth curve. These things are fairly normal, and we know that. As BMW, we've operated in the world for the last 110 plus years, right? So we know exactly how it works. So when we entered India, and I told you that we entered India 18 years ago, we entered with a plant at that time only. So we didn't enter the country and then decide we'll set up a plant later. The gap between starting off our sales operation or starting of dealers and the plant was not more than 3 months. We have been manufacturing in India for the last 18 years, even though we didn't know how the market will be. Okay, so we always have this philosophy in BMW that we build for the market, in the market.
So if you're committing, you're committing, and you
Absolutely.
figure it out.
Because you can't be one way or the other. You got to be there. You can't be half there, right? Okay, I'll look at it. A lot of people do that. And you'll see that in auto industry as well, you've seen. And so we always believe, okay, we'll come, we start manufacturing locally, we keep on increasing the number of models that we manufacture. Of course, there has to be some kind of a financial business case behind it, right? It's not that you're going to be totally stupid and say, I'm going to sell 10 units, I'm still going to make it, right? So we always said that, majority of what we sell here, we'll locally manufacture, right? So currently we are sitting at around 92 or 93% of what we sell is locally made here.
Fair. And while we are on the question of regulations and the government policies, one of the upcoming fields is EV, right? And all the automobiles companies are moving towards EVs. The customers are moving towards EVs. Could you enlighten us a little bit on the EV luxury segment? How is that panning out? How is the consumer behaving? Any challenges? Any opportunities? Would love to know that.
Very interesting question. I think when you're in India, you understand people will adopt to EV, right? I don't think any one of you will have ever doubt about it. But when you ask anybody outside, the first question they'll ask is, are you crazy? Do you think India will ever adopt to EV? Right? Because from the outside, it looks like there's shortage of power. There's shortage of infrastructure. There's no charging network, right? There's no investments on that. How can you ever adopt to EV? Now go back, I know all of you are quite young, but you go back to year 2000, right? When Supreme Court suddenly ordered that the public transport will overnight become CNG. You would remember that time? Yeah. So, and what happened after that? It went CNG without any infrastructure, right? India survived. It's quite a resilient country. And that's what I don't think people can understand, that in India, we jump technologies. We leap technologies and we adopt them pretty fast. Okay, so even if you go back to your consumer durables, like go to televisions, right? We actually skipped technology, right? So India, that way, I always knew, and our team always knew, that EV will be a big thing. And that's why I was talking to a journalist this afternoon as well. He asked me exactly the same question, that how did you plan your EV? And we said, we didn't jump on a bandwagon of a trend. We had a little bit of foresight onto this and we planned it ahead. right? We started working on EVs probably in India in 2015, actually, when we launched the i8, which was the first electrified vehicle, right? And then in 2021, last quarter of 2021, is when we started with the full product offensive. And again, here we didn't do the typical thing. What people would do is, okay, let me try with one model and then see how it goes. We said in 120 days, we launched 3 models.
Wow.
And that's what we did, right? We launched the iX, we launched the i4, and then we launched the i7, right? So we said 120 days, we're going to go full on and absolutely flood the market with the best options available at every price point. And I think that's what worked. That commitment worked because clearly people could see the cost benefit. So one is, of course, the environment and sustainability factor that people look at EV, but there's also a commercial factor, right? And I always correlate with this thing that India was a big diesel market, if you know.
Yeah, earlier.
And normally you buy a diesel for the torque, the pulling capacity, not for fuel efficiency, actually, or the cost of running, because the diesel fuel was cheaper. That's why it was the diesel economy here in auto industry. So clearly the Indian consumer still feels that, oh, I'm going to use not my competition, but a fellow brand's wording like kitna deti hai.
Yeah.
Right? That mentality is still engraved in us since the time auto industry started. So I think electric is very similar, that it's 40 to 50% cheaper to run a car. Why won't I adopt that? Right? And then also the usage conditions are like that in India, if you look at it, that we don't drive long distances, right? It's just 40, 42 kilometers we drive, nothing great, right? We have parking spots, at least our customers do. I say that, they've got a place, and if they have their private charging, then nothing to worry about. If you can plug your car into your mains in the house,
then no issues at all.
It's getting charged overnight. And that's why the adoption ratio is quite shocking, actually, because if you look at the older industry, you're talking about last year was 2 or 3% penetration, right? We are already at 18%.
As of today?
As of today.
Oh, wow.
Right? But that also, when I don't have a product at every price point as yet, there's still a few missing blocks. So if I actually compare like to like, right? If I look at, the iX1 long wheelbase, if I take an example, compared to X1, which is available in petrol, the penetration ratio is almost 40%. Right? So you can see that the adoption ratios, and these are quite big ratios compared to the world. Worldwide, even China, okay, if I take that example, China, if you look at it, is sitting at around 35% overall. Right, so getting to 40%.
When you're saying penetration, you're saying overall cars in the country versus the
that.
EV, right?
Yeah. So for us, when I'm selling X1 and iX1 as a combination, right, because they're the same car with 2 drivetrains, the electric contributes to 40% of the total sales within that. And that's same with the 7 and the i7 combination as well, right? So you can see that India is adopting to it very fast, and I expect that to continue. If you want to look at it from a country point of view, right? If you want to look at it from an environment point of view, it has to make sense that if you're doing electric, your power generation should be sustainable as well, and there should be circularity in the end with the cars, right? So if I look at India, adoption is good, which is right. We have installed capacity at least which are renewable, right? 47% roughly is renewable energy, right? Although the actual transmission losses make it lesser. Yeah. But that means there is scope for us to become one of the best renewable energy countries in the world, technically, right? And then if you bring in circularity as the next step, I think it's a perfect combination for that carbon footprint reduction. So I think India is on the right track on this one.
So the Indian consumer adopting to EVs, and I know a lot of my friends who are buying a new car.
I hope BMW, right?
I was talking about EV versus non-EV.
Okay,
let's not disclose the brands.
Okay, fair enough.
I was saying that whenever they're buying a new car, the EV has kind of become a default option or a main option, right? And I don't think it is just the commercial viability and saying ki sasta hai while operating. Somehow with the EV as a category, there is a brand or a prestige also associated with it. And also, I think the cars haven't been that expensive as well. So I just want to understand, if I were to understand the industry, is it the subsidies that have helped? Is it the way these cars are designed that they look so cool that people want to own them? Like, what is it? It cannot be just the cost of running it.
The cost of running is just one of the elements. Absolutely, you're right. But it helps you make that step over. Yeah. Yes. The first thought comes from your own value system, that you believe in the environment. I think that's where it starts from. But then after that, a few other things need to stack up as well for you to get to that stage. And the first one is always, is it viable for me to buy it? So you're right. At the moment, the way the GST is, right? It helps in, at least for us in our brand, it helps us pricing it at the same price point as a traditional engine. So then the customer is actually choosing depending on their requirement, not based on the value of the car. If let's say this did not exist, this subsidy does not exist in GST, the car would be at least 30 to 40% more expensive. Because the technology is new, right? So you have to understand new technology will, of course, cost you more, right? So from that perspective, that makes it easier. And then the third thing that comes is, of course, can you charge your car? Then the practicality aspect and the savings. And that's how you switch over. So yes, the starting point is the right intent that I want to look cool. Honestly, if the country did not adopt that green number plate, I think people will probably not like it. Trust me. That really helps because you're able to clearly indicate, I'm driving an EV. Finally, the society will show what we're doing.
Right? And I think cars are a status symbol, right? So
of course, absolutely. You identify by the car you drive, not by the shoes that you wear. Sorry.
Fair. Okay. Now, I think one last question before I change gears. Now, BMW is a legacy brand, right? And when there is a brand which has been into existence for so long, somewhere we lose the DNA of innovation, agility, all of that. But surprisingly, that hasn't happened to BMW. So what have you done as part of the leadership that such an old brand continues to evolve and, create and innovate?
Here we said internally, I think we are a legacy brand, but we are an iconic brand at the same time, right? So we don't just rely on a legacy or a pedigree of, whatever 100 plus years that when we started. Because if you look at history of BMW, I think if you ask somebody, when you think about BMW, other than sheer driving pleasure, what's the word that come in your mind? They'll say innovation, right? Be it the iDrive innovation or when we created the mid-class sedan, right? When the 1500 happened, the 3 Series happened. So if you go back to the history, we created categories. We created the X5 category, or what you call it, the SUV category. We created it. Every few years we do that, and you'll see that again. I think if you're following the auto industry and BMW, you would have heard about Neue Klasse, right? What we call as the new platform. And that's going to be another phenomenal jump in the way a car looks, a car drives, a car kind of interacts with you. So it's going to be very emotive. It's going to be, when you can imagine, and this is all public information, you can go and have a look. We've redesigned the steering wheel, right? And how could we do that? Because till now, behind your steering wheel always sat these dials, this instrument cluster or whatever you call them, right? I mean, they used to be really chrome and then they became digital, but they're still behind your steering wheel. And what that did was that you could never have the steering wheel with a vertical connect, which is supposed to be the best design in terms of driving, because then your sides are free, right? If you drive, you put it at, this angle, you put it at 10 and you put it at 2, right? Whereas ideally, the real driving is when you hold it like this, 3 and 9, which you can see in a F1 driving or any kind of, sports driving. We removed the instrument cluster. We actually totally removed it, okay? And we split it into 2 places. One, we put it on end-to-end on the windscreen as a projection, okay? Which we call as the panoramic drive, BMW panoramic drive, right? Because we are known for our iDrive, we started with that concept of the dial so that you could select and interact with the car. So now we put it actually on end-to-end, which is 1 meter long, almost a screen that is visible to you across the car, right? That allows us to remove the instrument cluster. And what that does is we are able to design the steering wheel, which looks really like a cool steering wheel, right? Where you're touching the buttons like this, like at a gaming. I mean, if you're gamers, you will know what I'm talking about, right? But you can do something like that on a car. So that's what we do. I mean, we have a joke inside the company. Actually, we don't need competition. We beat ourselves so much better as BMW. That's our culture. We're so hard on ourselves all the time that we push ourselves like crazy, right? And there are plenty of examples, like when in the history, SAVs were developed, or SUVs as we call it in India. In India, it's actually, I don't know why you call it utility vehicle. We don't use it as a utility. We use it as an activity vehicle. So the sports activity vehicle is actually the right word. But when we're developing that, because they're higher, ground clearance and higher center of gravity and everything else, one of the things that normally you would do in engineering design is that you will try to make it super aerodynamic design so that the efficiency is still maintained in spite of all these different
Correct,
dimensions.
of course.
Right? But they said, no, it has to still look good. Because you can make it a beautiful aerodynamic car, which doesn't look like a car. It looks like a jet engine, right, with a long nose and really sleek headroom, right, drooping tail, so that you can sit at the back. You can do that. It'll make it really. And a lot of, by the way, EVs right now look like that. Yeah. If you look at it, they look like that. That they've been designed as if to make it more efficient, right? But our engineers took on a challenge, saying that no, I want it to look like a proper, 3-box designs that are normally used to, like cars. Absolutely, that it should drive one like, but look like one as well. But we'll still get the efficiency what we want. And we did that. And that is why we say BMW driving dynamics, right? So these are the things we've been challenging ourselves, is that we will not compromise on the core DNA. And that's why the DNA is still known. So if you say sheer driving pleasure, you'll say BMW still.
So keep pushing yourself. You're not competing with others, but you're getting the next version, better.
Don't leave your core.
And don't compromise. Like, keep saying this is possible and we'll do it.
Yeah, evolve your core. I mean, it's very easy to take this. I mean, the same with the humans as well. Not only, I would say companies, but human as well. You have some value system, right? And you'll always face in your life that whether I should modify my value system or leave it just to get to my result. But sometimes you're going to push yourself to that limit. No, let me not compromise. Maybe I can tinker it a little bit depending on how the world is changing.
Yeah.
But the core remains the same, right?
And there has to be a way out.
It has to. There always is.
There always is. You just have to push yourself, work hard a little bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Great. Now let's change the gears a little bit. The audience today is a lot of auto sector enthusiasts who would want to work in the auto sector. And you've had fantastic career across auto companies and across countries. So for somebody who's wanting to get into the auto sector, what advice do you want to give? How should they think about their career path?
Really surprised you said that people are interested in joining auto industry, because, I mean, of course, I know what you mean by that, but let me create a parallel here. In India, on the retail space or on the dealership space, we struggle to get people in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because auto industry is not seen as a very high-paying thing. Right? So that's the ground level, right? Whereas if you look at overseas, if somebody is really keen in auto industry, what they'll start doing, it's still not a culture in India, so sorry, I'm not trying to compare or anything here, just trying to give you a parallel there. Okay? So that people would start doing is that when they're in their school, in their last couple of years, after year 10 or something, they start working at either a workshop or they start working in an auto dealership, right? Because they start gaining and understanding and getting the knowledge about it, right? I know these days it's much easier because internet will give you all the information about any
ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's even easier, right?
Much easier.
Exactly, but still, to get the passion, you need to live it, right? So yes, if people are really interested, I'd like to see that they actually are there in the early stages. I'm not saying, of course, when you're done your postgraduate, I'm not expecting that. But I'm saying maybe in the earlier stages, you're trying to still engage with the industry so that you understand the mechanics of it first, how it works. But anyway, coming back to your question, what you asked is, what advice I'll give you is, if you're really passionate about it, then just make it happen. That's it. Nothing else.
Find Vikram and make it happen.
Just make it happen. I mean, if you're really keen, absolutely push it, stick to it. And I think the example you were giving earlier when we were having that chat, exactly that's how it is. The passion should be so great that you really push yourself. But you got to be open, right? Because this industry is, like I said, a very unique industry. Right? It's not that just you're working with the company. You've got to work with the retailers. You've got to work with the vendors. There are a lot of layers of this industry when you talk about auto industry. So you've got to start somewhere. Yeah. I think what happens is, and I'll give you honest advice on this one, that, I never wanted to go into auto industry, by the way. Never ever. I had no passion about it.
But life happened.
It just happened. I never planned anything like that I will end up being in auto industry. But then I look back now 30 years ago. Yeah, it just happened that I ended up in the engineering industry and then into auto. But please don't just think that I want to be in that great, glamorous role straight away. Auto industry is not about glamour. I know. There's a lot of great sexy ads, a lot of great emails, a lot of great launches, right? That's not what auto industry is. Auto industry is about real cold face facing a customer, right? And if I give you some statistic, I don't know whether you will get shocked or whether you'll be happy with it. To sell one car, you need to contact 100 customers. That's how tough it is, right? So it's not as simple as some of the other industries, really, where you can just walk in and just create sales. So it's quite tough out there, right? And then to retain a customer, the average holding time of a car is, let's say, in a luxury environment, will be around 3.5, 4 years minimum. Can go up to 7 years, but I'm giving you average of 3.5. Okay, maybe 4 years would be average at the moment. So to be engaged with that customer for 4 years is not easy either. Right? You got to be consistent. You got to be diligent. You got to be knowing your customer. So there are a lot of things that you have to adopt in auto industry which are not there in other. So let's say you have to have hospitality talents in our industry. Yeah, you got to have problem solving skills in our industry. You got to have hardcore selling skill like real estate in our industry. You can think of so many industries that combine into auto. So it's quite a complex industry that way. Yeah.
Well,
so be ready. I'm not scaring you, but be ready if you really want it.
Well, at least for the BMW customers, I can definitely tell you that they're very loyal to the brand.
Thank you for knowing that. Are you one?
I'm not one, no.
Okay,
But probably I'll tell you why, and it's because I don't drive. So for me, BMW has always been this brand, which is the thrill of driving. I'm like, if I'm not driving, is it for me? Right.
It's for the driver at heart.
It's for the driver at heart. Fair.
No, there are a lot of customers. I'll tell you. We get a lot of customers who are probably never going to drive, because they're chauffeur-driven most of the time, right? But they just say, just in case, if I plan to, I just want to make sure the car is something I can drive.
Fair.
It's a driver at heart, we call it.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, with that, huge round of applause for Vikram, please.